Hello and welcome back to Creating Hanley. I am Kimberly at Creating Hanley, and in today's episode, we are going to chain piece. So if you've been sewing for a long time, you already know how to chain piece. Or I should say maybe quilting. If you've been quilting for a long time, or even just a couple months, you already know how to chain piece. But if you're new to quilting, chain piecing might be a term that you're unfamiliar with. So I have a sample of a quilt block in units. This is called a 9 patch, and I'm going to chain piece these patches, these units to make a block. So this is what we call a block. This is a 6.5 inch unfinished block. This happens to be the old snowflake star block, which I have a video on, so check that out in my playlist. But each one of these units right here is a patch. And you can see there are 9 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of those put together. This is a 9 patch. So I have one down here all ready to go. We did our hourglass units. Again, I have a video on that, on how to make these 2.5 inch hourglass blocks. A video on that. I did a video on how to make this whole thing, including this unit right here. So now if I explode this out, you can see there are 9 units, 9 little patches, and we are going to sew these together, and I'm going to use chain piecing to do it. So let's get started. So one thing that you can use is a leader. So this is just a piece of fabric that I have sewn over many times. And what that does is it kind of like prepares the, there's a couple things it does. It prepares the thread, top thread and bobbin thread, so that if there's going to be any like crazy wonkiness or if it gets stuck or whatever, it's all ready to go. And also, if you're putting points through, like if you're putting your fabric through this way, you always want to have a leader, and it's called a leader because it starts the project. And if you follow one up at the end, right here, if you have another patch at the end, and you follow that through after all your fabric has gone through, that is called an ender. So you can have a leader and an ender if you like. Usually you do that when you're starting your points. And that way, this little tip does not get lost in the feed dogs inside your machine, because then you have to take it apart and yank it out, and that's not a good thing. Okay, so besides that, now we want to look at our layout. So I'm going to take you down here. So if you look at this layout, you can see how I have this. So I want to make sure all my blocks are in the right direction and how I want it to be sewn together. So when I sew it together, I know it's going to be like this. So if I explode this out a little bit, I can see my 9 pieces, my 9 units, my 9 patches. Right? So an easy way to do this is by rows or columns. So you can either sew the columns together, and then once those are sewn together, then you can sew the columns together. Or you can sew the rows together and then sew those units together, right? So either way is not, either way is fine. You can also do 4 patches if you want to make this 4 patch, and then you can put these 2 together and sew that together, and then sew these 3 and sew it on. However that works for you. That's a little bit more complicated, but it works just the same. It's easier to do something like this. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And what I'm going to do is take this unit face side down onto this one, and I'm going to sew along this edge. So I want to make sure that I've lined it up exactly how I want it to be, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance right here. I'm going to take out my leader actually, and if you want to, you can pop pins in. Now, I only have a 9 patch, so this is pretty simple. However, if you wanted to make it easy for yourself, and so you can stay organized and maybe just organized in your mind, you can sew these, or I'm sorry, not sew, line these up, and then on the edge that you want to sew, that's where you put your pin in such a way that you know you're going to sew on this edge, right? So I'm going to do the same thing here, line these up, so that I know that this is perfectly in alignment, and I'm going to preserve the side that I am sewing on with a pin, or maybe not preserve, but alert myself, mark. So these are still here, these are in this line, and this is where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to mark my 1/4 inch seam allowance on my presser foot, and slowly. Now this has a lot of extra bulk. These blocks have a lot of extra bulk. If you're just doing 2 blocks, so for example, if you're just sewing like 2 pieces of fabric, just plain 2 pieces of fabric, there's no bulk. It's pretty flat. You can see it's pretty flat. But when you're starting to sew units together like this, there's all kinds of intersections and fabric upon fabric upon fabric. So it gets a little bulky. So you may need to slow down your speed in your needle here. Now, once you get to the end, don't cut your fabric. Keep it, or not your fabric, your thread. Don't cut your thread. Take your next piece and just slide it over, place it right under the presser foot, no cutting, and then keep going. Remove your pin so you don't break a needle, and then same thing, stop, and then place your new fabric under your new fabric unit under the presser foot, get a couple of stitches in, and then remove your pin, and then there you go. Now, because I have a small unit, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this first unit that I sewed. I'm going to take that off because I know it was at the top here. I can open this up, and this is exactly the same, the right order I want it to be. And now I'm going to place this onto here, and I know I'm going to sew along this edge. So I am going to flip this around so that the unit that I already sewed is on the bottom, and the new unit I'm going to sew is on the top. Now, does this work for all pieces in, all units in all the projects you're going to make? No, probably not. It might be a little bit cumbersome for some units, but because I'm just doing a 9 patch, it's relatively simple. I'm just going to do it this way. There are multiple ways to do it, but basically what you're doing when you're chain piecing is just sending units through the machine without cutting the thread in between. Okay, now when I open this piece up, I know this is in the center and this is on the run edge, and this piece needs to go attached to the centerpiece. So I'm just going to place that right on here like so and flip it around so that I know that the long piece is on the bottom and the new piece is on the top, if that makes sense. And then send this through as well. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit more. And then here's the last piece that I haven't attached the third unit yet. So I open this up, and I know this is in the center and this is on the outside. This is on the outside, so this is already sewn. Flip this down and then spin it around so I sew right on this side. That's chain piecing. So chain piecing is simply that. Just sending units through without cutting the thread in between. That's all chain piecing is. It's not necessarily doing the 9 patch, but it's just sending pieces through without cutting the thread on this side. You cut the thread after it's gone through. Now I know this is the center, and this is the top, and then this is the bottom. Now, if I wanted to, I can leave this in here, and I can iron real quickly, and then I can chain piece the rows as well. Okay, so I know this is the top, and this is the the middle, and I can chain piece the rows. So I just take the top, flip it over onto the middle row, and I want to line up the seams, make sure those nest, and then without cutting the fabric, I'm going to slide this through as well. Send this through with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to stop, reposition my fabric, make sure it's all in the right direction that I want it to go. Now with all of these intersections and layers of fabric, you might need to stop every once in a while, reposition your fabric, and then keep going. And that's okay, just to make sure everything is in alignment. Now, this is where I do need to cut my fabric. So here, I'm sorry, I keep saying fabric. Not fabric, the thread. And then I open this piece up because this row now goes on to this unit, okay? So I open this up, and then I take oh, you know what, guys? I screwed that up. This should have gone the other way. This goes like this. Oh, I sewed that on incorrectly. So I sewed that, I wasn't even paying any attention. And you should pay attention, because I want these to go from this side, just like this one. So anyway, I'm just going to throw this on. But just know that I made that mistake. But that's okay. So that's, and I can just take that out and redo it. But that's the idea behind chain piecing. You just don't want to break the thread as you're sending all of your units through. And you can have a long chain. So it creates a chain. That's why it's called chain piecing. Because at the end, you have this large chain of fabric attached by little pieces of thread. And there you go. And there's your 9 patch. Of course, that's wrong, but that's the 9 patch. All right. And that's your 9 patch. You chain piece the 9 patch. So I'm going to fix this bottom one so that it looks like this. All right, guys. Have fun chain piecing. See you on the next episode. Bye for now.